must say my suspicions were aroused that I'd gone too far, and yet still no sign of the park. Headed off the main street when I realised I'm getting far too close to the centre now, and weaved around a bit, sniffed the air as you do. A few spots of rain came down actually. Here I found the main university building and the big joyous park. So all is not lost. Ivana Franco. We'll be going to a city named after that gentleman in a few days. Meanwhile, we've got Lviv's National University named after him as well. Now, which way is which? Once I got here, suddenly it seems straightforward. You see, I did put that little yellow bald-headed man onto the street view, that's what it's called on Google Maps, because I thought this might be a little bit of a tricky find, and sure enough, the part that I didn't think would be tricky was, and the part that I didn't think would be tricky, no, hang on, the part that yeah, you know what I mean. So, oh, there's HI Hostel. Well, that's a good start, isn't it? At least they're not hiding too much. Here's a very suspicious character. You okay? Thank you. Oh, I'm going to get a fitting for a wedding dress by the look of it. No, that can't be right. And definitely not through there. HI Hostel, here we are. Not as tricky as the last one. Managed to find it. And without going up any further steps, just find a little courtyard which has this. It doesn't look too fantastic from the outside, does it? But you know what? It's what's inside that counts, isn't it always? And it's so refreshingly cool in the shade here. So I'm happy. Okie dokie. So I've had a chance to look around the hostel, and it's not the worst, it's not the best, it's somewhere in the middle, I guess. I'll know more after the first night, because the proof's always in the pudding when it comes to trying to sleep. That said, it's hot, even with the big windows wide open. It's one of those rooms which doesn't have to have the sun directly on it. It certainly doesn't have that.
and yet somehow it's mysteriously hot in there. It feels as though I'm in Asia. I'm in a mixed dorm, and what I would say is, if you're female and you don't like the idea of having a male in the dorm room, please book a female dorm, because otherwise it's no good. It's sort of acting as though you had somebody invade your own private room at home when a guy walks in, because it's a mixed dorm, it's going to happen. As it turns out, I'm the only guy and there are 5 girls in there, or 5 women in there tonight. I feel awkward about that, particularly as 2 of them, when I arrived, were so clearly uncomfortable that a man had entered the room. Unless maybe it was the receptionist they took exception to. But no, I suspect it was the arrival of a man. Perhaps they've had the dorm to themselves and it's just been girls there for a while. And suddenly a guy shows up and they are jolted into remembering, oh yeah, it's a mixed dorm. Bugger. We're going to take a walk now, just coming out onto the street outside the hostel. And there's the world famous chain of Ukrainian value for money, home cooked food, canteen style eateries. Who's that a hatter? Unfortunately, as I've said to you on countless occasions, I'm sure, my stomach isn't able to accept meal-size meals. Therefore, unless I ordered a takeaway, which they might be able to supply me with, it would be a bit of a waste of time me going in there for just a few spoonfuls of something and then calling back hours later for a few more spoonfuls and calling back hours later and calling them to bring me my now stone cold plate of bits and pieces of food I hadn't yet devoured. More decoration. Starting to like Lviv, aren't you? I knew you would. Once you started seeing the similarities in the architecture with Krakow, you'd probably start feeling as charmed by Lviv as you will be by Krakow. And if you don't like architecture, I'm sorry, you're looking at the wrong man's videos. I'm going to be weaving around the streets of Lviv for the next few days, next several days. You can expect quite a few videos from Lviv. Giving you fair warning in advance. I could get very carried away. Oh, there's another hostel nearby where we are. That one's called Hostel, and then Hostel spelled in Ukrainian. So whether it's actually called Hostel, or just it's called Hostel, I don't know. Be a bit tricky to find on booking.com, wouldn't it? Look at these lovely stairs. What a grand entrance that is. I won't go in there because I think it's a bank by the look of all the ATMs. I'm sure they wouldn't want me in there with a camera. Possibly. Highly likely, actually, they wouldn't want me in there with or without a camera. What I need to do is to get an elevated position. Ideally, I need to climb up the scaffold, scaffolding which is on the outside of that building in order to look across. But I don't think the workmen would be too chuffed if I tried that. There's a lot of fine work here I wish I could get to show. Unfortunately, the word is impossible. Impossible. Some things remain just out of reach. I've just seen somebody who I need to make the acquaintance of. Vinoteka Praha. Who's this scoundrel? Just look at that cheeky look in his eye. I don't know if you can see that. Unfortunately, there's no name, so he'll just have to remain as a cheeky chap with a cheeky look in his eye. But I like it. I've just walked past a strange kinky sex shop. A lot of the sort of dominatrix style mannequins you might imagine to see in maybe this in Soho. Is that still like that, the way it was in the 70s? Don't know. Yes, the weird thing about that sex shop was, or kinky clothing costume shop, there was this loud recording of a baby crying coming from the premises. Most bizarre. And, oh no, can't see what's going on out there. Maybe I'll cross with the green man. I'll let the green man show me the way. And the atmosphere here is very much of being a very, very, very long way from any problems. But of course that isn't the case, because there'll be numerous people here who are very much affected by what's going on with the fighting in other parts of Ukraine during the war. If you're going to photograph one thing or stay a while and then try to interpret one thing, it's probably going to be this. As far as Lviv's concerned, I should say. I recognise the man. He's Taras Shevchenko. He's the national poet. Yes, revered even more than Adam Mickiewicz. And this, well...
Tam ciekawisz.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. You know, sometimes you're just going to get drunk guys coming up to you, aren't they? Just because, not even if you've made accidental eye contact with them, but so long as you just smile and nod your head and end up shaking hands, they go away without getting fractious. Most of the time. That's my experience anyway. But it does seem that I do attract the loonies. How on earth could that ever be? Yes, these must represent, presumably, something to do with the works of Taras Shevchenko. Unfortunately, should I say unfortunately, I have absolutely no intention of reading any of his work because I'm not really much of a reader. But I'm sure every keen literary student in Ukraine could fill you in on the details of what those figures are representing on that big thing sticking up. As for me, I just look at it and think, oh, quite like it. Oh, there's a family crossing with Mr. Milinki. Maybe it is a crossing. Oh, maybe it isn't. Sometimes it pays to just go with the locals. Other times they could get you put in hospital. That's quite a lot of freeze, I think you'll agree. And that sounds like a really clapped out bus. If you're a freeze lover, you're probably lapping up this video. If you're not, it could be torture. Now you could be thinking that just perhaps these statues monuments are undergoing conservation. However, I think the reality is that because of Russia's war on Ukraine, they're trying to protect what they see here in Lviv as their most precious monuments. I'd seen on the news that they'd done the same in Odessa, for example. I'm hearing a band playing, but is it actually a band on their way walking down here? Maybe I should investigate further. Well, this is very strange indeed, because where I just walked from, they weren't there unless I'm completely blind and completely deaf. A brass and oompa band version of Eye of the Tiger. I guess somebody decided, you know, it's got to be done. So there they are. Very young lads. Well, that was a bit of unexpected fun, wasn't it? So I've looked carefully, and unfortunately the shop I was looking for no longer seems to be in business. That means I'll have to walk a little bit further just for something basic. It's too early to say this for sure, but it's enforcing what my feeling was about Lviv years ago when I used to visit. They have an absence which is very noticeable compared to Poland, for example, of little stores. Those little Żabkas, Biedronkas, Carrefour Expresses, little mini supermarkets, places you can walk into and grab, excuse me, you can grab some basic food items, drinks, just those little things that a corner shop would have. But unfortunately, Lviv just doesn't seem to have the same kind of shops. So I don't know where people go if they just want to grab a pint of milk, for example. Or maybe I'll be proven completely wrong and things have changed. I just need to get more into the back streets. But I've got a plan B. I'm now going to go back again in the direction I've already been twice. And this time I'm going to stick purposefully to my plan, which is to go to Roxolana shopping mall. And there, in the underground, the basement, allegedly 1 floor down, there is a Silpo supermarket. Here's hoping. What do you do when a fat man in a pink shirt comes waddling towards you, half drunk, and an empty glass of wine is in his hand? Or an empty wine glass, I should say, is in his hand. Top him up, I hear you say. Doesn't sound good, does it? Well, I'm not a wine waiter. Do I look like a sommelier? Perhaps I do. That's a bit saucy. A little risque, madam. And what's more, she's got a friend. I know it's a week away, or a little over a week away, depending. But I've already told you, after Lviv, I'll be going to Ivano-Frankivsk if I can. And I was checking online. I was checking on... God, my throat. I was checking online, and from the Ukrainian train website, which understandably, under the circumstances of what's going on in the country, perhaps isn't the most reliable source in the world. It didn't look as though I had much in the way of options to get to Ivano-Frankivsk from here by train, because a lot of the train services weren't available. No seats available, it was saying, but I'm not sure if that meant there was actually no train running. Quite possibly. Here's a famous image, of course, the world will know this. The theatre in Mariupol, where there were many children hiding, as well as adults. But of course, even though they wrote children in big letters in front of the theatre, that just seemed to attract the Russian bombers. And here is pathetic me with my worries in the world, whether I can get a train ticket to Ivano-Frankivsk. Absolutely insignificant, isn't it, my worries compared to the worries of millions and millions in and outside of Ukraine, who do and did and want to again call Ukraine their home. So much for me saying I wasn't going to get distracted and I'm going to stay focused on getting to the Roxolana shopping mall. I'm just hesitating here because I remember 100 years ago staying in a place roughly in this location. I wonder if it was there. It was a small room for a high price. Actually, ludicrously high price for the times, but there was no real market back in 2004, so you didn't know whether you were getting a reasonable deal or not. I'm going to crane my neck and probably give myself a bit of a dizzy spell if I'm not careful trying to capture these images. Carol King, Coral Danilo, is that? So King Danilo. I don't know who he was, but presumably a famous character from Ukrainian history. Google, help me out here. Yes, obviously, they'd like to protect the whole city, but it would be more than a monumental effort to clad the whole of Lviv in metal protection like that. And it's just my luck that I didn't go further. Oh, hello. There's a little Rinnock. Oh, why don't I walk around the Rinnock and see what's in there? I don't have a need really, but could always have a look. I didn't think the Rinnock would be open at this hour, but I was wrong. And it's one of those super snug Rinnocks. Very little space to walk or get elbow room. But it's one of those great places. If they haven't got it here, they probably haven't got it anywhere. You know, those type of markets. Bazaar. Not bizarre, but bazaar. I'm trying to think of what I need, what I might be tempted by. In the centre, that seems to be the major food hall. Ladies' cosmetics. I thought it was pens and pencils, but it sort of is, but you know, it's the makeup variety rather than the ones that you use for writing in your notebook. Sure enough, it's a bit late in the day for places to be open and operating still. And it doesn't go hand in hand that just because you're a foreigner and you come to a place like this that you'll be ripped off. It's going to just depend on the individual. There are kind-hearted souls who work here, putting in a hell of a shift, day in, day out. Don't think I want any food items, so I won't bother going into the food hall. You might get lucky or you might get unlucky as far as whoever you get served by. But isn't that always the case everywhere? It's just going through my head that I might need to buy a new pair of underpants at some point. Well, I know where to come looking, don't I? For a bargain. Meanwhile, an Obmin Valut, a Cantor exchange, a place to swap your dollars or whatever cash you're carrying into Ukrainian money. But you want to check the rate, obviously. Right, let's go in the shopping mall. I guess I'll have to turn the camera off. It says none of these things. It doesn't say no camera, but they usually aren't happy if you've got a camera.